what are they going to do when they run out of wildlife? What are these guys going to do when they run out of wildlife? Here we are, 25 years later, and everybody's wondering how come Darfur is unfolding like it is. You know, what's happening in Darfur? And it's like, duh, you know, look at the last 400 years of history and you'll know. And if you'd have identified the indicators that were very, very clear and present as of about 1975, and you started paying attention to the natural resource base and human ecology in these places, you may have not only averted the loss of 130,000 elephants and millions of antelope and the livelihoods of most of the people that live in those areas, but you may well have averted the crisis in Darfur as well. And you wouldn't perhaps have this very kind of acrimonious now kind of scenario that's unfolding where, for instance, just in the last 3 months, the French military, and this is not very well known, but the French military bombed 2 towns in northern Central African Republic to chase the Janjaweed or the Arab horsemen or whatever we want to call them now out of the northern Central African Republic. And they have displaced already tens of thousands of people from where we used to work, where the wildlife used to be, south. Because what are these guys doing now? They pretty much run out of humans to exploit in Darfur, so they're moving into Chad, they're moving into the Central African Republic, and they're moving certainly farther south into kind of the DRC and western border of Sudan area. So here we are in Zakouma, and we go there because this is one of the last places where elephants have survived. And the only reason they survived was there was an EU project, a European Union project that was begun about 20 years ago that was kind of established as a last stand, you know. And there was a Frenchman who we used to work with, in fact, in northern Central African Republic, who went there and decided this is going to be the last stand for elephants. And sure enough, they were successful because the EU has been pumping in, you know, about $1 million a year or so into this project in Zakouma. And when you look at Zakouma, it is 300,000 hectares. So, you know, 300,000 hectares in an area the size of Texas is basically like Dallas-Fort Worth in Texas. And yet, you know, when you go to Zakouma, you see all of that abundance in nature that has survived in this little tiny place, you know. And the only reason it survived is because they've hired 100 horsemen who are non-Arab for the most part, certainly non-nomadic Arab. And they've got a long history, most of them, of having been enslaved by these guys for centuries. And so finding Africans to defend this park against these incursions is very easy. And getting them to be dedicated is not very difficult. And so sure enough, you know, you're watching this dynamic and you think, God, you know, nothing has changed in 20-some years. And we're in Zakouma and you think, God, this is the last bastion for not only elephants, but unbelievable variety of antelope and birds and just an incredible array of wildlife and an unbelievable concentration. I mean, you see those qualia birds, just literally hundreds of millions of these birds in this place. You go outside, there's nothing. You can fly for 2 hours over Chad and see not a single animal, wild animal. You get to Zakouma, it's just like night and day. And so we're working in Zakouma, and all of a sudden you start seeing these indicators. And one of the indicators that we saw, and Richard kind of identified it back in the 80s, was we started seeing young elephants being eaten by lions. And we start noticing that the lion population in Zakouma is very high. much more than I would have imagined, you know. And as the days went on, it's like, oh, another orphan elephant killed by lions. Oh, another one. And so you start thinking, this isn't right. These lions usually don't eat elephants unless there's a poaching problem. That's certainly our experience from northern Central African Republic. And then we find our first, you know, elephants. And, you know, back in those days, you'd find an elephant limping and you think, okay, and then you'd see the spear wound. But today in Chad, it's AK-47s. Or the preferred gun there, kind of ironically, is the M14.